Hi there. This is your lecture on connective tissues. So your connective tissues, these are your expected learning outcomes that you should be able to do after this section of this chapter 5. So describe the properties that most of your connective tissues have in common. Remember, there's always outliers. Discuss the types of cells that are found in connective tissues. Explain what matrix is of a connective tissue and describe the components of that matrix. You should be able to name and classify 10 types of connective tissue, describe their cellular components and their matrix, and explain what distinguishes them from each other. So visually, you should be able to recognize each connective tissue type from just looking at specimens or photographs. Let's get started. So first of all, what is connective tissue? Connective tissue is going to be the most abundant, widely distributed, and variable type of tissue in which your cells occupy less space than the matrix. So let me get my little pointer going on here. There we go. Most of your cells are not going to be in direct contact with each other when we're talking about connective tissue. That's very different than our epithelial tissue that we covered in the previous slides. So connective tissues are highly variable, they're highly vascular, lots of vascularity. But your loose connective tissue are going to have many blood vessels versus some connective tissue, not so much. For example, cartilage does not have blood vessels. So this really depends on which specific tissue that we're talking about. So your functions of your connective tissues, they're going to bind the organs, support, provide physical protection, provide immune protection, movement, storage, heat production, and transport. So let's back this up. We'll do one by one. Binding the organs. So they're going to connect one bone to another. So they're also going to connect muscles to bones. They're going to connect skin to muscles. They're going to hold organs in place. So that's what we mean of binding organs. As far as support, your connective tissues are going to support the body and its organs from the internal frameworks. They're going to help to form the internal frameworks of the organs, provide the organ shape and structure. Physical protection. They're going to protect, cushion, and they're going to cushion those delicate organs. Believe it or not, fat, you're going to figure out, adipose tissue, it is a cushion for us, and it's a necessary cushion for us. We'll get to that when we get to the adipose, so no worries. Immune protection. So your connective tissue, those cells are going to attack foreign invaders. As far as movement, your bones are going to provide a lever system for the body to move. The cartilage are going to be involved in speech. So your tissues are going to help with the actual movement of the body. Storage, main storage of fat, calcium, phosphorus. So we are going to store our large biological molecules and other minerals and other organic components in there. I say organic because phosphorus is organic versus calcium is inorganic. Heat production. It helps to metabolize, metabolization of brown fat helps to generate heat. Now, isn't that great? But we don't have that much brown fat as older individuals, but we'll talk more about that and go into who really has a lot of the brown fat. Transport. Blood is used to transport. And what does it transport? It transports gases, nutrients, waste, hormones, blood cells. And so blood is considered connective tissue. So we're going to get into all that goodness. So let's go into the first grouping, fibrous connective tissue. They are considered fibrous because the fibers are so obvious, okay? The components of the fibrous tissues are going to include many different types of cells. You got fibroblasts, macrophages, leukocytes, which are white blood cells, plasma cells, mast cells, adipocytes. So depending on which type of connective tissue, you have very specific types of cells. By the way, this is a short list. So fibroblasts, what are they going to produce? Fibers and also ground substance in the matrix. If you recall, the matrix is going to help to provide the structure. So to kind of help you on that, fibroblast, think about a Pac-Man game. I mean, not Pac-Man, let's go Space Invaders. Space Invaders, that's what I meant to say. And if you can think, use this, Space Invaders, you shoot, just like such. So your fibroblasts are going to, quote, blast out fibers, yeah, into the ground substance. I hope you enjoyed that. Okay, macrophages. Macrophages, they're going to arrive from a type of cell called monocytes. And what the macrophages do, they're going to phagocytize foreign material and then help to activate the immune system whenever they sense foreign matter. And we're going to call that foreign matter antigens. So the antigens could be bacteria, the antigens could be viral, it could be protist, it could be just something foreign in the body that the body recognizes that's not self, that is something else. And so next is going to be your leukocytes. The leukocytes, or also white blood cells, they help to function in immune defense. In your Anatomy and Physiology II, you have some very, very specific chapters regarding immunity, and you're going to get into the meat and the potatoes of all of these different types of cells. So the examples of cells that you'll go into even further in your journey is going to be neutrophils. Neutrophils are going to attack bacteria. Lymphocytes are going to react against bacteria, toxins, or other foreign agents too. You have so many more than this. I feel like this is just, that's cute. So anyway, plasma cells. Plasma cells are going to arise from lymphocytes, and they're going to synthesize antibodies. You're going to find your plasma cells in your blood, okay? That's why when they check your blood plasma, they're really checking as far as what the ratio is going to be, because if you have beyond the normal limits of the ratio, that's an indication that there's an infection. So your mast cells are going to secrete heparin, and they secrete heparin to inhibit clotting, and histamine, to dilate those blood vessels. So that is the function of mast cells, secreting heparin and histamine. Adipocytes. Adipocytes are going to be your fat cells. Your adipocytes are going to be clustered in some fibrous tissue. They're going to dominate that fibrous tissue, and we're going to call that tissue as a whole adipose tissue. No worries, we're going to go through every single one of them in these 30-some PowerPoint slides. Okay, so the components of the fibrous tissue, oh, I already said continue, my bad. You also have collagenous fibers and reticular fibers, last but not least, elastic fibers. Your collagenous fibers are going to obviously be made of collagen. They're going to be tough, flexible. They resist stretching. So that's why we always talk about how we want lots of collagen in our face, right? Because we want our face to resist stretching, i.e. hanging and developing wrinkles and such. So collagenous fibers are also called white fibers because due to their appearance, their whitish appearance in the fresh tissue. Your tendons, ligaments, and the deep layer of skin are mostly made out of collagen. The less visible parts of the matrix of collagen, they're going to be in the less visible parts of the matrix of the cartilage and the bone too. So you're going to find collagenous fibers in many different places. So let's talk about the reticular fibers. Those are going to be thinner. They're thinner collagen fibers that are coated with glycoprotein. If you recall, glyco meaning sugar, proteins, put it together, it is a large biological molecule that is the components of sugars and proteins. And so the reticular fibers, they're going to also, where you're going to find them, forming a framework of the spleen and the lymph nodes. You're going to find reticular fibers in parts of the basement membranes underneath the epithelia. Last is going to be your elastic fibers. Your elastic fibers are even thinner. They're thinner than the collagenous fibers. They're going to be made up out of, guess what? Elastin. So if you can imagine, if I tell you something is elastic, right away you think about a rubber band. You think about something that can stretch and recoil. And so that's exactly how we would describe your elastic fibers. So look here. You can also see that this is figure 5.13 if you want to get some more information about this. This is showing a large fibrous piece that you can see your ligaments are going up underneath. So the tendons are going to connect muscle to bone. Ligaments connect bone to bone. So we're looking at tendons and such. I don't know if I said that. I think I said ligaments. I apologize. We're looking at tendons because that is going to connect your extensor muscles of your forearm. It does not showing the forearm here, but you're going to have plenty of chances to see the extensor muscles. The extensor muscles are the muscles that actually lift the fingertips up towards the sky, those extensor muscles. The ones on the underneath the arm are flexor muscles, and that's going to pull your fingers towards your underside of your forearm. So your ground substance. Your ground substance is something, we're just basically hitting all the vocabulary here. Your ground substance are basically going to have features, the substance surrounding cells. It's usually gelatinous or rubbery. Okay, so it's not completely liquidy, but it's not completely solid. It is more of a gelatinous or a rubbery consistency. What it does, it helps to absorb compression forces. It's going to contain large molecules. It's going to contain proteoglycans. Proteoglycans are another type of extracellular matrix fiber, glycoproteins and such. This is an overview that we're going to get very specific on every single one of these. So GAGs. GAGs are glycosaminoglycans. Glycosaminoglycans are going to be long polysaccharides. So let's use our words that we've learned in the past. A saccharide is a sugar, so we are dealing with a carbohydrate. Poly, so we are dealing with a long chain of sugars. So these long polysaccharides are also going to contain amino groups and uronic acid. And so they help to regulate water and electrolyte balance of tissues. Examples of the GAGs are going to be chondroitin sulfate, your heparin, and your hyaluronic acid. This is a big word that is in today. Got to have hyaluronic acid. Well, let's put it together. Whenever you see people on TV, they're like, oh, it's got hyaluronic acid. It's going to plump up your skin. Well, what it's doing, it's regulating the water and electrolyte balance of your tissues. So that's very real. All right, next is going to be your proteoglycans. Your proteoglycans are giant molecules, right? They look like bottle brushes. If you had me for 1111 or you've had Pearson 1111, you can refer to your chapter that goes over the cells. And to me, they look like little feathers because they have these little extensions off of them. We'll see them a little bit more when we get in here. They're going to form gravy-like colloids. Colloids are larger molecules, and those are going to hold tissues together. Okay. Last but not least is going to be your adhesive glycoproteins, sugar proteins, adhesive. It's all in the name. They are going to bind together components of tissues. All righty. Let's talk about types of fibrous connective tissue. Let's going to separate them out. Separate them out into loose connective tissue and dense connective tissue. It's defining pretty decent. So in loose connective tissue, there's going to be more ground substance, which is the space between the surrounding cells, and less of the fibers, versus dense connective tissue is going to be mostly fibers with less of the ground substance. So let's give some examples of loose connective tissue, areolar connective tissue, and reticular connective tissue. For your dense regular, and dense irregular. So that's kind of nice. Dense is in the name, should be really easy to remember. So areolar tissue is going to have, like I said, loosely organized fibers. It's going to have an abundance of blood vessels. I didn't get a chance to tell you that. It possesses all 6 types of cells and fiber types, okay? It's going to underline the epithelia in those serous membranes between the muscles, passageway for nerves, and blood vessels. So as you can see, this is a very used type of connective tissue. So let's look at the picture here. Here's the ground substance. Remember, the ground substance is that gelatinous type of substance. You can see in this areolar tissue, you have elastic fibers, right? You have collagenous fibers, the thicker one. You have these fibroblasts. The fibroblasts are the cells that are going to blast. Remember, choom, choom, choom. They're going to blast out and actually make those fibers. And so this is a nice little drawing of it. This is the actual microscopic view of it. Pretty spot on, looks like it to me. So the reticular tissue. The reticular tissue is going to be made up of a mesh of reticular fibers. So it's a mesh. It's also going to include those fibroblasts. So they're going to form supportive stroma. The stroma is going to be the framework for the organs. They're going to be found, the reticular tissue is found in the lymphatic nodes, the spleen, the thymus, and the bone marrow. So let's take a peek here. Here's some reticular fibers. See how it looks like a meshwork where there's extensions and extensions. Within it, we're finding, so these are actually leukocytes that are within it here. So we're not finding in this view, we're not seeing the fibroblasts specifically, but it's all good. This is the actual microscopic view of it. So this is pretty distinguishable between that and the areolar. If you remember, the areolar is going to possess all of the cell types and fiber types, or all 6 cell types and fiber types. So boom, this one is just mainly the reticular and then the fibroblast, and that one's throwing in leukocytes too. So this is perfect. Dense, regular connective tissue. This is obviously dense. It is fibers on top of fibers on top of fibers. They're just layered and so forth. They are collagenous fibers, so they're collagen fibers. The ground substance is less. There's not that much ground substance laid in between the fibers. And you can see you do have some fibroblast. You can see fibroblast nuclei in this view right here. So your dense, regular connective tissue is going to have parallel collagen fibers and is densely packed. So that elastic tissue is going to form wavy sheets. You're going to find this in your tendons. Your tendons, like I said before, they're going to attach muscles to bones, and your ligaments are going to hold bones to bones. This is dense, irregular connective tissue. As you can see, regular is going to literally be in waves. They are all going in the same direction. Irregular is not. So irregular dense connective tissue is densely packed. It's randomly arranged collagen fibers, okay? It's more difficult to see any visible cells. It's going to withstand lots and lots unpredictable stresses. You're going to find this in the deeper layers of the skin and capsules that surround the organs. I don't know what this number 6 is. That's a typo. Okay, that's just a typo. All righty. So as you can see, this is in the deeper layers of the skin, bundles of collagen, and you can see that they are all over the place, just randomly arranged. The ductal glands you can see within them. We're looking at the cross section of the deeper layers of the skin. Here's also some fibroblast nuclei that you can pick out. Boom, boom, boom. The ground substance is this lighter portion in between. So just like the dense regular connective tissue, there is less of the ground substance and more of the fibers. See, less of the ground substance, definitely more of the fibers. Moving on to your adipose tissue. I got a deep respect for some adipose tissue. Your adipose tissue is going to be composed primarily of adipocytes. Anytime you see site, that means cell, okay? So they're essentially, quote, fat cells. There's going to be space between those adipocytes. That space is going to be occupied by areolar tissue, reticular tissue, and blood capillaries. Okay, so the fat that is going to be deposited in the body for long-term energy storage is going to be a reservoir for that energy for later, and it's put into the adipocytes. So the amount of the fat, we're going to go ahead and give it its proper name. Fat's not a bad thing, but let's go ahead and call it triglyceride, because the triglyceride is the actual molecule that we're talking about. Three fatty acids and a glycerol molecule makes a triglyceride, which is body fat. So the amount of triglycerides and the number of adipocytes are actually stable in a person. So which that means is you're like, what do you, I keep gaining weight. I keep gaining weight. Well, here's the deal. Your number of adipocytes is fairly stable, okay? Unless you get to an extremely high percent of your fat mass, then your adipocytes will start mitotically dividing. But what happens is when you gain fat, your adipocytes that you have in adult, they just get bigger and store more fat in the already existing cells and get bigger and bigger and bigger. So your fat is going to be continuously recycled. We store it, we use it. We store it, we use it. But here's the deal. If you don't use it, you're just going to keep storing it because your body's going to think, oh, well, I'm going to need this for later. So new triglycerides are going to get synthesized and the old ones get used up, but the new ones get thrown back into the fat. And so if you don't, I don't want to go into that. As a fitness professional, I could go on a really, really long trail on that one. So let's talk more about the differences between white adipose tissue or white fat and brown adipose tissue. Okay. The most abundant is going to be the white fat. That's the most abundant in adults. The purpose, the function of that white fat to provide thermal insulation, keeps us warm, right? To cushion the organs, such as the eyeballs and the kidneys. It's going to, you need a certain amount of fat inside your body in order to basically keep your organs in place and cushion. It's also going to contribute to body contours, right? Your female's breasts and hips, booty, why not? It's going to secrete hormones that help to regulate metabolism. So this is very, very interesting. I could go into a whole other section that talks about how estrogens can be secreted if your body fat is too high. And so that is why it's important to maintain your body fat. Okay, so we could also go into many other type of environmental estrogens. That's a whole other class. All right, brown adipose tissue, brown fat, is going to be mainly in infants and children. Okay, adults do have smaller deposits, but not too much. The color comes because it has lots of blood vessels, lots of mitochondria and mitochondrial enzymes. So that gives it its brown appearance. And then also functions to generate heat. So if you see here, this is showing your example of your white adipose tissue. Sometimes it's also called yellow. Sometimes it appears yellow in certain spots. This is showing breast where it is appearing yellow. You can see some blood vessels that are intermixed between the adipose sites. The lipids, the triglycerides, are inside the adipose sites. And here's a great way to identify the adipose site too. The adipose site itself kind of even gives a whitish, clearish appearance when you look in here. You can see the nuclei are pushed all the way to the very edge of the adipose site. And that's very indicative when you're trying to identify these cells. All righty. So let's move on to cartilage. Cartilage is going to be stiff connective tissue, has flexible rubbery matrix. Okay, it's going to give shape to many organs, like for example, give shape to the ear, the tip of the nose, the larynx. It's going to provide that not only shape, but also the ability for movement, but limited movement. So the features of your cartilage, you have chondroblast. Remember what I told you what blast does, right? Chondrocytes and perichondrium. So, I'm sorry, perichondrium. Trying to throw some extra letters in there. All righty, so your chondroblasts. Your chondroblasts are going to be cartilage cells that produced the matrix of that cartilage. So like I said before, blast, 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 blast. Later on, you're going to come into another word called clast, C-L-A-S-T, which are going to be those that break down. But we're going to save that for when we go into the blood. So chondrocytes, site meaning cells, okay? So these are cartilage cells. Those cartilage cells are going to be maintained within a cavity, and the cavity is called a lacunae. And so the next one is the perichondrium. That's the sheath of dense, irregular connective tissue that is going to surround that elastic and most of your hyaline cartilage. And so your elastic cartilage, your hyaline cartilage, it has this sheet. Not the articular cartilage, because that is an issue with articulation. We'll talk about that when we do our bone stuff. Alrighty, general features are going to be that they don't have any blood capillaries. Avascular, we learned about avascular when we were talking about our epithelial cells, some of them. And they also, so diffusion is going to bring the nutrients in. They need to get nutrients. It's basically going to happen via diffusion, but capillaries themselves do not penetrate into the cartilage, which is why it heals so slow. Okay, takes a while, a lot longer. The thing about the cartilage matrix, it's rich in your gags. We went over gags a few slides back. Contains your collagen fibers also. So 3 different types of fiber compositions, types of cartilage are going to be your hyaline cartilage, your elastic cartilage, and your fibrocartilage. Let's go into those. Hyaline cartilage. It's going to have that clear, glossy appearance. So I am looking at the bronchial right here. Boom. You got your tracheal. It's not quite into the bronchial. I apologize. We're not going that deep. This is the extension of the trachea. So it's going to have a clear, glossy appearance because of the fineness of the fibers. It eases that joint movement. It's going to keep your airway open, which is why this is perfect for the airway. Helps to move the vocal cords, right? And you're also going to find hyaline cartilage assisting in the growth of juvenile long bones, because the bones are not completely ossified in children yet. And so this helps with the growth of those long bones. So where are you going to find it? We already showed you a little bit. You're going to find it hyaline cartilage and articular cartilage, costal cartilage. Those are the ones that come off of the ribs. Not all of the ribs that meet in the middle, but those that are going to attach to. We will cover this when we go into our bones also. The trachea, okay, and then the larynx is going to be up in here. Also, highly made up, fetal skeleton is highly made up of hyaline cartilage and sharks, but we're not studying that. All righty, let's look here. So you can see here, this little canal, the outer circle, that's a lacunae. That's the canal. Inside the lacunae is the purple dot. That's a chondrocyte, just like such, okay? The perichondrium is going to contain it all, okay? Cell nest, that's just going to be those groups that are going to nest together. On the outside of the cells is going to be the matrix. So all together, this is going to constitute hyaline cartilage. Let's go to elastic cartilage. So you're going to have to identify the difference between hyaline cartilage and elastic cartilage. So let's go over this, and right away my eye came to it, and I bet you it's come to you too. So this cartilage is going to contain elastic fibers, okay? As you can see here, look at those elastic fibers within that matrix. So yes, you still have a lacunae, you still have the chondrocytes inside, but in that matrix, you have elastic fibers. So that right there is a dead giveaway. This appears smooth and glossy. This one has elastic fibers. All righty, so what's the purpose? Lots of flexibility, elastic support, right there on the ear. That's why you can grab your ear, turn it around, flip it around. Don't do it too much. That's irritating. So external ear and the epiglottis. Fibrocartilage. So your fibrocartilage is going to contain large, coarse bundles of collagen fibers, okay? It resists compression and absorbs shock. And so you are going to find this in the pubic symphysis. That is the small area between the front of your hip. We're going to go through all of that when we go on our bones, between, it's a small area, the pubic part of it. And then the menisci, also intervertebral discs. So they're showing you an example of your intervertebral discs right here. Okay, you can see your collagen fibers, boom, just like such, and the chondrocytes, boom, 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 boom. But the difference, these collagen fibers, if you look at these are the elastic fibers, okay? So the collagen fibers, a lot thicker, a lot densely put together. This right here is for absorption of shock and resisting that compression. So it is going to be more compactly made up, but still we don't want it so compact that it doesn't absorb that shock. So, all righty, moving on to the next type of connective tissue. That's going to be bone or osseous tissue. Osseous, excuse me. Bone osseous tissue is calcified connective tissue, composes the skeleton. You got two types of osseous tissue. You got yourself some spongy bone and you have compact bone. And it's exactly in the name, so it should be real easy to do. Spongy bone looks exactly like a sponge. It has these little slivers and plate that give it that appearance. It's basically going to be found in the heads of the long bone, right? In the middle of the flat bones, like the sternum. The thing about the spongy bone, it helps to take absorption of impact. That way your bones don't just crack. Compact bone is going to be denser calcified tissue that doesn't have visible spaces between the actual bone tissue itself, okay? That is going to form all of the external surfaces of the bones, and then also in the long bones. So we're going to get real specific when we go into our bone chapter on that. All right, actually, I lie. We're gonna get a little specific here, but even more in our bone chapter. So your bone is going to be arranged in these cylinders called osteons. Okay. The center of that is the osteonic canal or the center canal. It's going to run the longitude of the bone shaft, and that is where you're going to find your blood vessels and your nerves. Then you have concentric lamellae. Those concentric lamellae look like rings. If you can imagine the rings of a tree, that's what it looks like. Then you have your osteons. Your osteon is the osteon is the central canal and its surrounding lamellae. So put it together. Then you have, of course, your sites. The sites are the cells themselves. Osteocytes are mature bone cells that are located in the lacunae between the lamellae. Don't you love these words? If you recall from our cartilage, the lacunae is that cavern in which you're going to find the cells. And then canaliculi, canaliculi. Those canaliculi are going to basically be delicate canals that are going to radiate from each of the lacunae to its neighboring lacunae. That's going to allow the osteocytes to contact each other. Last but not least, periosteum is going to be the fibrous connective tissue that covers a whole bone. Now, if you didn't get all this in this moment, it's all good. You'll get to repeat, rinse, and repeat. And then when we get in the bone chapter, you'll get to rinse and repeat again. All right, let's take a peek at some compact bone. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at a cross-section of this long bones where you're going to find the compact bone. Now we're going to look down the shaft. As you look down the shaft, you are going to see all of these ring-like structures, right? They look like the rings of a tree, but those are called osteons. And you can see the osteons are made up of these concentric lamellae. Those are the ring-like structures, the lamellae. In the middle is the osteonic canal or that central canal. That central canal is going to be where you're going to find your blood vessels and your nerves. And last but not least, the lacunae. If I've told you before, the lacunae is like a little cavern where you're going to find the osteocytes sitting in there. And you could even see it's not labeled osteocyte on there, but I'm letting you know those little black things are osteocytes. And the lacunae is the osteocytes sitting in that lacunae. Canaliculi are these little microscopic canals that are essentially going to pass from one osteon to another. That way you can get some messaging going back and forth. So, wow, I covered on here. Very good. So that bone matrix is going to be deposited in the form of those concentric lamellae. So when somebody asks you, what's the matrix of the bone? It is essentially those concentric lamellae. All right, moving on to the next connective tissue is blood. So blood is fluid connective tissue. And what makes a connective tissue is connecting one piece of the body to another piece of a body. And so it's valid. So your fluid connective tissue is going to travel through tubular blood vessels. It's going to transport cells. It's going to dissolve matter like minerals or sugars and proteins. And it's going to move all that goodness from one place to another. It's also going to collect oxygen from the lungs, move it all around the body, send it all to all the tissues. It's going to pick up carbon dioxide at the tissues because that's waste, that's metabolic waste, travel that back to the lungs where you can exhale that carbon dioxide. And so the blood is a very important connective tissue. So it's going to contain formed elements that are going to be suspended in a liquid ground substance. And that liquid ground substance is called blood plasma. So the formed elements are going to include red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So red blood cells get yourself another name now that you're a next level up. We're going to call them erythrocytes. Erythrocyte cell, like I said, the purpose, transport oxygen and carbon dioxide. Leukocytes is another name for white blood cells. Please make sure you are familiar with these new names, okay? Those leukocytes are going to help to defend against infection. Remember, I had told you a few slides back, there was more leukocytes than they put on that last slide. And we have neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, monocytes. Platelets. Platelets are going to be cell fragments. And those cell fragments are essential in blood clotting. So looking at this blood smear, you're going to see erythrocytes appearing a pale pink, like the pale pink discs with light centers. And your leukocytes are going to be slightly larger, having different shaped nuclei. So you can see that here. Look at those leukocytes, just like such. So to me, they didn't really draw it pale pink, they drew it bright red. But this is what you're really looking at underneath a microscope. These are your red blood cells or your erythrocytes. These are your leukocytes, just like such. It's labeling them very specifically. Neutrophils, they're lymphocytes, monocytes. And your platelets are going to be the smaller fragments that do not contain nuclei. So you look over here, these are your platelets. And they drew them out for you. They do not contain that nuclei. Moving on to your nervous and muscular tissues. These are excitable tissues, okay? Because I get so excited about them. No, actually, because they actually take excitation, energy is needed more in order to make this take place. So it gets this whole other learning outcomes. You should be able to explain and distinguish excitable tissues from other tissues, okay? Should be able to name the cell types that compose nervous tissue. Important to be able to name those. Should be able to identify the major parts of a nerve cell, visually recognize nervous tissue from specimens, looking at a picture or an actual specimen. You should be able to name 3 different types of muscular tissue and describe the differences between them. Last but not least, visually identify any type of muscular tissue from looking at a specimen or an actual photograph. Let's get started on the first. What do you mean by excitability? So that excitability, ability to respond to stimuli by changing membrane potential, okay? I gave you more of a general definition. That's very specific, and that's good. Basically, it develops a high degree, it's developed to the highest degree in both nervous and muscular tissues. That is why they're called excitable tissues. That excitation is going to take place, and it's going to be found in the difference between the charge on different sides of the membrane. We're going to call that difference in charge or voltage a membrane potential. In your nervous cells, you're going to get changes in the voltage that result in a very rapid transmission of signals from those nerve cells to other cells. And essentially, that excitation is going to serve as a message to tell those other cells to do something. In the muscles, the change in voltage is going to result in a contraction or shortening of that muscle cell. So getting started first with the nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is specialized for communication. That's how it gets the message across your body by electrical and chemical signals. Your nervous tissue consists of all of these things, and you absolutely need to know them. Neurons. Neurons are nerve cells. What they're going to do is they're going to detect stimuli. They respond quickly. You don't even have to think about it. They just do it. And they're going to transmit coded information very rapidly to other cells. So the neurons are going to tell a set of cells to do something, and then those cells can transmit the message, and then it transmits the messages, and so forth. Your next set of cells are called neuroglia or glial cells. What they do is they're more of a helper cell. I put helper in quotes in my air quotes you didn't see. So those neuroglia or glial cells, they're going to protect and assist neurons. I don't know why I quoted it. It's right there. They're going to be essentially the cleaner uppers, the housekeepers of the nervous system. Okay. On those parts of the neuron, you're going to have cell body, dendrites, and axons. The cell body is going to be the bulk, and that houses the nucleus and other organelles. The cell body is going to control the protein synthesis. The dendrites are going to be extensions off of that cell body, little branches off of it, and they can receive signals from other cells and transmit the messages down into the cell body. And then the next thing is the axon. That message gets sent down the axon, which is also called nerve fiber, sending an outgoing message to other cells. And your axons can be more than a meter long. They can be pretty long. So let's look at the little picture. So all of this I'd said on the other picture. Here is your cell body. As you can see, here's your beautiful nucleus. Here are your dendrites, those extensions off that I was telling you. Those dendrites receive signals from other, could be from other axons of other neurons or from actual other cells. They're going to be uptaken by the cell body. This is also where all of the other organelles, including that nucleus, like I said, then it's going to transmit the message down the axon, and then transmit an outgoing message to either other neurological cells or to other cells in general, and transmit an excitation message. Muscle tissue. So skeletal muscle would be a perfect example of another type of cell that receives a message from this neurons, the axon of a neuron cell. So your muscle tissue, it is very specialized to contract when stimulated, okay? It actually exerts a physical force on other tissues, organs, and fluid. It's also an important source of body heat. So when you get cold, if you start shivering, right, you are having muscular contractions and making body heat. If you decide to go out for a jog or do some jumping jacks, you are having muscular, specifically skeletal muscular contractions, and you're producing body heat. Okay, 3 different types of muscle tissue you have to absolutely know: skeletal tissue, cardiac tissue, and smooth muscle tissue. So first, and by the way, these are so easy to spot. I will show you what makes them so obvious. Your skeletal muscle tissue. This is showing you your gastrocnemius right here, the calf muscle. As you can see, this right here is a muscle fiber. This long from here is a muscle fiber. This is a muscle fiber. So we call them muscle fibers, but guess what a muscle fiber is? It is a cell. We don't call them muscle fiber cells, right? It is just synonymous together that a muscle fiber is a cell. So most of your skeletal muscles are going to attach to bone, most of them. They're going to contain multiple nuclei, okay, that are going to be adjacent to the plasma membrane. Do you see how these nuclei are along the plasma membrane, just like such? Your muscle, skeletal muscle, has striations. Do you see these lines going down across the muscle cell? That is striations. That is a dead giveaway that we're looking at muscle cell in addition with something else, okay? Because another one has striations. So I don't want to get you confused completely. But what we're looking at is muscular fiber, long, thin cells, striations, just like such. You can see the nuclei off to the side. They are voluntary. There's conscious control over your skeletal muscles, okay? Now, there are a select few skeletal muscles that your body, they're postural muscles that your body just contract, that you don't think about necessarily. Okay, but overall, the big picture, conscious control. All righty, cardiac muscle. Remember, I told you there was another muscle that also has striations. You can see, boom, boom, boom. Okay, so yes, they also have striations, but the thing about your cardiac muscle, I'm going to back it up to the skeletal muscle. Do you see how the skeletal muscle is one long fiber, striations in between? Your your cardiac muscle has these branchings, and you can see it branches off. So look, it looks like a Y connecting to another Y. And then you have these little connections in between. There's one connection here. They kind of cut it off here. There's a connection here. So they are randomly placed. Those are called intercalated discs. Those connections, you can see them. So those intercalated discs are going to join those cardiomyocytes, right? Myo means muscle, cyte means cell, cardio means these are the cardiac muscle cells. And so it's going to be limited to the heart wall. The cardiomyocytes are going to be short and branched, like I just showed you, with one central nucleus. So that's also a dead giveaway between that and skeletal muscle cells. One central nucleus, boom, just like such, versus several, boom, boom. Like this one cell has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nuclei in my vision right there. So this is multinucleated versus cardiac, one central nucleus. So you should be able to right away pick out the difference between those two. Okay. Oh, so it's striated and involuntary, not under conscious control. You don't sit there and think, oh, I got to make my heart. Wait, beat the heart. Or wait, beat it. Darn it. No, your heart's just going to beat until it doesn't. All right, smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is called smooth because, you guessed it, doesn't have striations. So that's a dead giveaway. Also, your smooth muscle is going to taper at the ends. Let's see. Do you see how it tapers? And then points and tapers, just like such. And then points and tapers. So that's a dead giveaway for smooth muscle. No striations, tapers at the end, has one central nucleus, right? Involuntary functions. This is going to make up your visceral workings of the walls and your walls of your hollow organs. This is showing you your small intestine. Your blood vessels are made up of smooth muscle also. So with that, actually, I kind of want to go into that shape. I told you about it tapering at the end. That's that fissiform shaped cell. We covered that way back. So I just wanted to point that out here. So I want to tell you, let's go back to that smooth muscle piece. What you're looking at is excuse me, you're looking at the small intestine coming right off of the stomach. This is off of the esophagus. So the moment you put food in your mouth, it's going to start pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. What's going to happen is the smooth muscle contraction from your rooter, i.e. your mouth, to your tutor, which is your anus, is going to squeeze and then squeeze the next one below and then squeeze below and squeeze, 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 squeeze. That's why the moment you have your first sip of morning coffee, you're like, oh, I gotta go. Okay? Because you have smooth muscle contraction going all the way from the rooter to the tutor. And we are actually going to give that a more scientific name, and we're going to call that the alimentary canal. Okay? From the mouth all the way through the digestive system to the anus is the alimentary canal. Beautiful. All righty. So I hope you enjoyed this PowerPoint. I know it's longer than I had expected, being 35 slides, but I wanted to make sure to cover all those goodness. Please, if you have any questions, put them in my office hours. All right. I really enjoyed this. Bye.